Dan, Coach, that you eat, sleep, and think football?
Yeah, I would say so, man. I'm fortunate enough to be just watching football full time now. So it's you got to pinch myself sometimes. It's heaven for me, man. Every day I get to break film down, talk to coaches. So it's the good life. I can't complain.
Dan, I've used your playbook on college football 25. I've not done it on 26 yet. Have you done one for 26?
I did make one for 26. There's some complaints about it because there's a little bit too much passing in there. So you may have to weed that out a little bit.
Yeah. So, but I have it. Look, it helped me win a national title, so I'm thrilled about that. But that's a large undertaking because you have to, based on the game, you kind of have to go through multiple offenses and teams and pull that. How long does it take?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm fortunate that I usually get a little bit of a sneak peek at the game a little bit early, so I get to kind of sort through some things before everybody else kind of goes crazy on it. So I have like kind of an idea of what offenses are going to be cool based on who I've studied the past year in college football. And I mean, the guys over at EA do such a great job of staying as true as you possibly can without knowing the playbook to some of those offenses. So I really am able to kind of sort out friends of mine that have done some cool things, and it makes my work a little bit easier, but it usually takes me a couple days to put it all together.
So Dan, as we head into a brand new season, what are some of the, I guess, trends, as you may refer to them as, or concepts, or just kind of things out there that are piquing your interest the most at this moment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it varies based on the conference you're in, who you have at quarterback. I mean, there's so many factors in it, obviously, but I think one thing you're going to see more of this season is coaches trotting out two quarterbacks at the same time more often this season. Whether it's, one guy can throw it a little better, one guy can run it a little better, but just having the threat of multiple passers on the field, I think is going to be important. And I think with the roster management question in college football, you're paying your QB1 so much money. You probably don't want to run him 15 times a game. So is there another guy that can come in and do some of that dirty work, kind of like what Taysom Hill does with the Saints or guys like that, that you're not going to put in danger in the same way that you may put your QB1 in danger if you're running him all the time. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, there's so many different rabbit holes we could go down and talk about. I'm really open to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about schematically in college football.
Well, okay, the game, of course, has changed dramatically. Remember when everyone was like, "Oh my God, this wide open Hal Mumme," and then Mike Leach, et cetera, and the Big 12 was known as the wide open conference, and everyone in the SEC seemed to like that's not football. Now they all do it. Did you see that coming, even when they kind of looked down at that offense back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to kind of like have some context on the history of it, and I nerd out about this stuff. So obviously, Hal Mumme and Mike Leach made the air raid popular, but even before that, what Lavelle Edwards was doing at BYU, I mean, just basically dominating an era of college football with a pass-heavy attack, and obviously Bill Walsh and the West Coast offense. The 80s like really kind of established that style of football, and it really took a while, I think, for it to take hold in the SEC. Obviously, Hal Mumme worked at Kentucky and had some success there, but it kind of went up and down. I think the core principle is the offense itself is a concept-based offense. So it's about spacing the field. It's about giving athletes room to make plays. And, ultimately, if it's effective, it's going to keep, it's just going to keep living and keep iterating. And coaches have obviously continued to add to it. And I mean, I think you're going to find those air raid wide open concepts in every offense, but I do think we're cycling back around to some bigger personnel groupings too. I think you're going to see some teams having fullbacks out there this season and having multiple tight ends. I think, football's cyclical. It goes in these cycles, and we're heading back to, I think, maybe a little bit of a smash mouth era here.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a couple of kind of maybe rapid fire about some high profile coordinator hires. Mike Norvell brought in Gus Malzahn, who taught him how to run that offense. And then Mike Norvell put his own flavor on it. Norvell's a pretty darn good play caller. Last year was kind of overmatched. I don't think it was the play calling. It was the talent and the vibe there. But what does Gus Malzahn bring to that offense that maybe Mike Norvell can't do? Or is it what's the difference there?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you make a coordinator hire of that caliber, it's an identity hire more than anything. And obviously, Gus is well known for the way that he was able to run the football at Auburn. And I think ultimately, Florida State in the ACC wants to have more of a smash mouth mentality in running the football, be able to run the quarterback a little bit. And obviously, with who they got in the transfer portal, he's got some. Thomas Castellanos has some run ability. I don't think they're going to run him like they ran Nick Marshall at Auburn or anything like that, but I think it's an identity hire where you're like, we're going to get the run game going. When Florida State was really good, they ran the ball super effectively, especially counter and schemes like that. And I think ultimately it's having another coach that shares your philosophy, your core philosophy of being able to run the football. And maybe Norvell can spend a little bit more time on the pass game because he knows the run game's taken care of with Gus.
Doug Meacham at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a return to Mike Gundy's roots. I mean, spreading the ball out, throwing it around. I think, they've gone a couple different directions at Oklahoma State, and they've had some high years and some lower years. And I think if you look back at their history, when Oklahoma State was at their ultimate best in recent memory, it was when Todd Monken was the offensive coordinator. And obviously he's with the Ravens now and does a phenomenal job out there and does things a little bit differently, but he had a very spread mentality. And I think that's what Coach Gundy's most comfortable with, is really spreading it out, throwing it around. And I think they're going to return to some of his roots. And ultimately, if you're a head coach that's been there for a long time, Kyle Whittingham's the same way. It's like, hey, we're going to go down the way I want to go down. And ultimately I'm going to return to the style of football that I'm most comfortable with. And I think that's what Gundy's doing.
All right. I have two more, both in the Big 12, Mac Leftwich at Tech and Jason Beck at Utah.
Both great names to throw out there. So Mac Leftwich, I'm a huge fan of his. He's a young guy, coordinator who started off at Incarnate Word in San Antonio, did an amazing job with them. One of the most historically good FCS offenses in history. And then really what he was able to do with GJ Kinney and flipping around Texas State was pretty remarkable. And, he kind of comes from that Art Briles, Baylor tree a little bit schematically, where they're going to try to throw the ball vertically. They're going to try to run the ball hard between the tackles. And I mean, ultimately a coordinator's best friend is the weapons that you have on that offense. And Joey McGuire and James Blanchard have put together an unbelievable roster at Texas Tech. And, it's just going to be fun to watch them put an offense together this year. I think they're going to have good quarterback play. I think they have a couple quarterbacks that can play. And they have some incredibly talented skill position guys. And if they're good up front, they could be really dangerous this year.
I remember when Baylor hired Jake Spavital. There was, there's some coaches that I've gotten to know over the years. Some thought it was a brilliant hire, and some thought it was not going to work. Year one was interesting, but year two was successful. And was it
for sure
what Coach Spavital did, or was it Sawyer Robertson also taking over? And those two have a great combination in the offense.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the things we talk about on the Play Callers Club podcast all the time is that we believe the most important relationship in all of sports is between a play caller and a quarterback. Like, that is the most important relationship that really drives the success of an offense, period. And I think Spavital has a really great scheme. And it's about finding the right trigger man who can make the right decisions. And I think Sawyer Robertson was ultimately that guy. And you could tell, like, they started out with DeQuan Finn and tried to run the quarterback a little bit and tried to do some different things. But when Sawyer Robertson really established himself as the starter, and they also, got more, they got solid on the offensive line, I think probably week 5, week 6. And once they settled into who they were and found an identity, they became a really dynamic offense. And obviously, Spav wants to stretch the field vertically. He's spent a lot of time with Dana Holgerson at West Virginia, and has a similar identity of being able to spread people out and really make people pay, but also run the football effectively. And I think it's always both, and it's never either or. It's never just the coordinator or just the quarterback. It's usually a combination, and those two seem like they're on the same page. And it seems like Sawyer Robertson's able to really kind of be that coach on the field that is making the decisions that Spav wants him to make.
How about Matt Wells and Avery Johnson, that combo at K-State? Because we know how talented Johnson is, yet sometimes you wonder about him as a passer, a pure passer, and they have high expectations. How do those two work out, you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be really interesting. Obviously, Matt Wells had a lot of success at Utah State with Jordan Love and getting him, ultimately to the NFL with the Packers, and he's developed quite nicely. And so I think that's kind of the challenge for Kansas State historically, with back to Bill Snyder and some of the early Kleiman era teams. They ran the quarterback a decent amount, and some of the things that they did with Will Howard or Skylar Thompson or guys before that was interesting. But I think you're ultimately trying to develop a blue chip prospect into a guy that could potentially be playing on Sundays soon. And so I think there will be an emphasis on the pass game, but I also think you're probably going to see him get under center a little bit more, get back to some of Kleiman's roots of running the football and working off of play action and not just relying on the quarterback to generate a lot in the run game. So I'm excited to see that offense. I think it's going to be a nice mixture of kind of that old school North Dakota State toughness and some of what Matt Wells did at Utah State and spreading it out a little bit and giving the quarterback a lot of free reign in the pocket. So that's going to be an interesting one to play out. I think if he throws the ball well, they're an incredibly dangerous team.
So, Dan, we talk a lot of Big 12. I don't think we brought you on with the intention to just talk about them, but we start to kind of look. I mean, granted, there's 16 freaking teams, but we start to kind of look through them and going like, damn, there's a lot of really interesting storylines. Kenny Dillingham. I mean, I don't want to ask you like who your favorite coach to follow these days is, because it's probably like picking a favorite child because there's just different flavors and everything. But how high is Kenny Dillingham on that list of just interesting offensive minds in college football, and how dynamic do you expect this ASU offense to be with the quarterback back this year?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Arizona State obviously had an unbelievable run last year, and I think a key hire was bringing Arroyo in as the offensive coordinator and just taking a little bit off of Kenny's plate, because he's so high functioning and so energetic, and he's doing so much, I think, on the roster management side and the program building side at Arizona State, and it's really hard to do all of that and be calling plays every Saturday, and it's a lot. And so I think having somebody you trust who can build out the bones of the offense, and then he's always going to come in and provide kind of those creative flares that he was pretty famous for doing that at Oregon and Auburn and Florida State before that. I mean, he's a brilliant offensive mind, but I think having another guy there that you trust, and then obviously the arrival of Sam Leavitt and what he did both with his legs and with his arm, I think Arizona State really could solidify themselves. But I feel like I could say that about a lot of different teams here. I think you're going to see a lot of close games, and there's probably going to be a team that rises through the ranks that was maybe not as expected just because they were able to pull out some close wins.
Okay, I remember a few years ago, a friend of mine who was at the time working at the American Football Coaches Association said, there's a coach at Eastern Carolina University that everybody's going to want to hire, and it was Lincoln Riley. Okay, who is that guy right now that no one knows about, that is this offensive superstar, hiding in the swamp or so to speak?
Man, there's so many guys I could talk about, and I feel like I may offend some friends by not mentioning them here, but I've got to go with somebody who's a little bit off the beaten path. So the head coach right now at UC Davis is a guy named Tim Plow. He actually had a kind of a rough layover at Boise State. He was the OC at Boise State for a little bit, and now is the head coach at UC Davis and is kind of getting to run what he wants to run. And it is incredible, super dynamic, super creative. I think he does a great job teaching. I know that's an FCS team that probably not a lot of people are paying attention to, but in my opinion, some of the best college football outside of the Power Four is in the Big Sky Conference in FCS. So I think he does a phenomenal job. There's so many guys I could mention, but I'll start with that one.
All right. How about Ben Johnson, from being the offensive coordinator with all the bells and whistles for Dan Campbell in Detroit as a head coach in Chicago? Can he help raise the level and talent and maybe the future of Caleb Williams in that offense?
I mean, I think I talked to some NFL coaches this offseason, and one of the phrases that came up several times was, everybody's chasing Ben Johnson schematically. They're seeing what he's doing and implementing some of those things. So he's really, I think, at the forefront, on the cutting edge of what people are doing offensively in the NFL. But it's really difficult to come into a new environment with new players and just drop the Detroit Lions 2024 playbook down and say, hey, we're gonna look just like this. Because the reality is, he had multiple years in a system with the same quarterback, the same core, an exceptional offensive line, and they were able to each year progress and do more complicated things. So I think year one in Chicago is not going to be just like last year's Detroit Lions, I think there's a progression of installing what you want your identity to be and growing as a team. And I think being able to put more and more on the quarterback over time. I think Caleb Williams is in the perfect situation to be successful, and Ben Johnson's the perfect coach for him. And, I would imagine it's going to work, but I don't think it's just going to be plug and play in the way that I think some people think it will be. I think it takes time to develop that chemistry and rapport, and that's eventually going to come. But I think they're on the right track.
He has a better eye for offensive linemen himself than many offensive coordinators. Not that they don't, but he's just got kind of a knack for plugging people in the offensive line that a lot of guys who are more that play quarterback or receiver or something like that come up through the ranks. He's really good at that.
Yeah. I mean, I think he understands fundamentally that in order to have success in the NFL, you need to have a competent quarterback and a above average to great offensive line. And you could see that his mark was immediately on that Chicago franchise. As soon as he got there, they were making moves to shore up the interior of the offensive line, bringing guys in and really addressing that first and foremost. And I think what you see is like, it's nice to have, a Maserati or a Bugatti out there at receiver, but if you can't protect the quarterback, you can't take advantage of that. And so I think he understands that. And I think that they're going to very intentionally build from the inside out. And I think that's the recipe for success right now in the NFL. Defensive lines are just too good. You can't get away with stuff.
Dan, one more question, if you don't mind. Steve Sarkisian, with what he's done and just completely revamped his career to a brilliant play caller. Yet again, sometimes, like, for example, against Ohio State down in the red zone, which it does get more condensed. How good is he as a play caller and the respect you might have for what you've seen him do?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you start off studying college football every offseason, and this is both the college guys and the NFL, the first guy they start with it's usually either Steve Sarkisian or Chip Kelly, depending on what your flavor is. And Sark does such an incredible job of scheming up concepts each week, and they execute really well. And obviously, I think some Texas fans were disappointed with the way the year ended, but I think it's also important to remember that they were dealing with some injuries at the quarterback position, and it restricted some mobility and really does pare down that play call sheet a little bit when you're dealing with that. And so it's going to be interesting to see what the offense looks like with Arch. I think he can run a little bit more, but I think in terms of the coaches that set their quarterbacks up for success, I don't know if anybody does it better than Sark in terms of giving them completions in the screen game that get their confidence going and get the offense rolling, and then ultimately being able to take deeper shots down the field. He's one of the best designers of the screen game. I'd really put him and Sean Payton in a similar category of just their screen game is next level, and everybody's probably stealing plays from them because they're that good.
Yeah, they do some wrinkles, and again, I'm not an X's and O's guy, and that's why we have you on. But there's some of that stuff that they do with different motion, throwbacks against the grain, which you think are dangerous as hell, but it looks so good. How many hours of film do you watch in a day? Be honest.
Yeah. Well, probably way more than I should. No, I mean, I'm super fortunate. I get to basically work on football all day, every day. I'm talking with coaches constantly, doing consulting and different things like that. So I would say, I get my kids up in the morning, get them dressed, get them to school. And then pretty much from then on, I'm watching film, and then I get them to get them dinner, get them to bed. And then I'm usually watching more film. So, I mean, I'm like a kid in a candy store, man. I get to watch film all day.
No, you do a great job of it. I'm so glad we are able to reach out to you. Dan, thank you very much. Trends in offensive football. Obviously, we talked about the podcast, Play Callers Club, and what you have online. Go to CoachDanCasey.com for more information. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Dan Casey with us on 365 Sports.